this will destroy college football as you know it, but I think it will make it better. And that is the ACC has approved a merit-based distribution of funds. In other words, you do better in the athletics departments, then you're going to get more cash. Sounds like a big, huge mess, and it probably is. But here's how it will destroy college football and athletics as you know it, which might not be a bad thing, because the smaller schools that don't get as much money are already behind, because then they would get less money, so they're going to fall further behind. It's exactly like small market teams in Major League Baseball. They fall further behind while the Yankees sign a new contract with the YES Network. So if this happens, you are definitely going to see a super conference, and I'm all for it in both the ACC and the SEC, because does Vanderbilt bring as much to the table as Alabama or Georgia or South Carolina or Florida? Absolutely not. And we can talk all day about how they bring academic integrity. I don't give two flips. At the end of the day, I think that this will happen maybe at the ACC, and it will grease the wheels towards a separate super conference. So the ACC, as Smoky Mountain Red pointed out, grasping at straws. Yes, they are. They're trying to save their conference. But in reality, it's like when I sat down with Roy Kramer in 2000. And I said, you realize what you've created with the BCS would set up a playoff because you're seeding teams. And he goes, no. I was like, okay, but no, you are. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're seeding teams. And so this is they don't mean for it to do this, but this will grease the wheels for them to fall apart anyway, and could grease the wheels for a super conference if other conferences adopt it. Thoughts, Caleb?
Yes, but other conferences are not going to adopt this. And I will tell you.
So. I don't think
so. Yeah, because the Big 12 adopted this with Texas. It nearly destroyed them. The ACC is doing this. Here's what's happening. The ACC is doing this so they can stay in business through 2036. This way, and Florida State and Clemson and all those other schools are saying, okay, this is enough to keep us afloat until we can finally leave in 2036. This is what this is about. And so this brings, my assumption is this brings a certain level of stability back to the conference until 2036 when the whole thing dissolves. The SEC would never do this, nor would the Big Ten ever do this, because revenue sharing is essential to the conference's surviving. So you are going to have a super conference. I'm with you eventually. I think you'll have like SEC and Big Ten be AL and NL, and then an overall conglomerate league. They're going to bring all those teams with them. So Vanderbilt's coming. Here's what I think they might do, though, Dave, and this is what I think would be a great idea. Have a super conference. Treat the lesser teams. Do what FIFA does with the Premier League.
Relegate?
Yeah, relegate. Where the bottom.
I know that from Ted Lasso. I don't watch any soccer because I'm American.
Yeah, so okay, you have a conference of 50 teams, and then you have a lower conference of 50 teams, and or maybe 40 teams, I don't know. But the bottom 3 fall out, and the top 3 come in, and that's just how it happens. And
but you would never be able to get back.
The top 3 teams in the bottom go in every year, and the bottom 3 teams in the top fall out every year.
Yeah, but if you got less money, you're not going to have the same facilities or NIL support or anything else. You would never, if you dropped out. Yeah, drop it, Mizzou. Amen to that. But if you drop a team, they would never make a comeback. And see, the reason that works. They could
come back in. The teams at the bottom are bound to come back into the top at some point, because somebody in the bottom half has to go into the top half every year.
Yeah, but at least in soccer, you can spend more money. I mean, I don't see how that works. But I think those bottom teams would continue to be the bottom teams forever, and you might rotate them in. Yeah, I mean, I think Wake would drop out of the ACC and forever be out of the ACC. I think they would be the big pile of Wake.
So what you're saying is, even if they rotated and came into the bigger conference, they would be at the bottom of the bigger conference, so it really wouldn't matter.
Yeah, they might rotate in. I tell you, too, where if I'm an SEC fan, this perks up my ears. Because if the ACC does this, or does what you're talking about with relegating, and they somehow have their bottom half is even lower than it is now, and it's pretty low already. The bottom half of the ACC is pretty bad. So if it's even worse, and literally you're playing second stringers in the second quarter versus a conference opponent 4 or 5 times a season, then SEC fans, you got a major gripe if an ACC team like Clemson gets in and a second team, like let's say Alabama or Tennessee last year, didn't get in. That to me is that throws off even the playoff picture. Or you want to talk about the 13th team. If you want to talk about that 12th or 13th team when you have the playoff next year, man, the ACC is already bad enough. Do they deserve a seat at the table if their conference gets worse?
Well, this is something Josh Pate brought up, which is if college football is somewhat evenly spread out like it used to be, it's okay to have these conference championship automatic bids, but it's laughable to have the top 6 conference champions get automatic bids now because there were two. First of all, as Pate points out, if you're a top 6 if you're a conference champion and you can't be in the top 12, how in the world do you deserve to be in the playoff at that point? If the 5th and 6th best conference champions can't be a top 12 team in college football, who thinks that conference champion is going to be able to go play Alabama, who may finish 11-1 and just miss out on the SEC title? A lot of people kept thinking this 12-team playoff was going to give these smaller schools a seat at the table. No, it's not. It's going to expose the haves and have-nots of college football more than ever before. Because
it completely is. You're right.
Yeah, because I'm sorry, when Alabama plays, okay, who won the group of 5? Who was the best group of 5 team this past year? Like, who won the American? I don't even know. Like, say Navy wins the American one year, which happens. Alabama plays Navy. Navy gets the automatic bid. Does anybody think that's a game?
No. And NIL is already growing the disparity. If nothing else changes, if none of these theoretical things that we're talking about changes, then it doesn't matter. NIL is going to continue to separate the haves and have-nots. Wow, Mr. Jones, you stole my line. It's only delaying the inevitable. It is. Doing these things might delay the inevitable, but the inevitable is that you're going to have a super conference. Now, I know we had a post that said, why not have conferences based off regionality? And I agree that was cool and that was classic. And that's the way probably college football should be, but it's not going to be. And I'm okay with seeing a team play 12 significant opponents a year and a 9-3 gets them in a playoff. Caleb, I'm okay with not seeing the UTEPs of the world and the Akrons of the world. Maybe it's because I had to cover so many of those games. But if you have a super conference, you're playing somebody pretty good every year or every week, excuse me.
Yeah. So by the way, there are going to be regional conferences. This is how this is going to go, guys. The SEC and the Big Ten are going to gobble up so many teams. They're going to make conferences within their super conference, and they're going to organize them regionally. And that's going to create it. It won't be perfect. Some rivalries will go by the wayside, but there will be new rivalries created. So if the SEC takes 30 teams, they'll have 3 10-team conferences based on regions at that point. And so it's not going to be that big of a deal. I think, honestly, here's my radical take, Dave, and I think Tennessee should get out ahead of the curve on this. I think Notre Dame, where they're one step ahead of everybody, they're behind in a lot of ways, but staying independent. I know the SEC ties and loyalty is a thing, but given the fact that you can negotiate your own TV deals, honestly, I think the SEC holds Tennessee back.
So they're kind of like the Yankees with the Yes Network.
Exactly.
Interesting.
I think Tennessee should. I think they're holding themselves back, splitting revenue with these other SEC schools like Vanderbilt and Missouri. I do.
It's interesting. Elias says once we started emphasizing the national title over everything else, this became the inevitable route. True.
Yeah. Does anybody think
I don't dislike it. I'm not afraid of change. I'm not afraid of having a quality opponent every single week and a 12-team playoff.
Does anybody think college football is more exciting now than it was in 1990 when you had it all spread out and Colorado and Georgia Tech shared the national title?
Do I think it's more? Yeah, I think it's much more exciting now. I hated debating that back in the day. I hated that? Did you not hate that?
Well, in 1990, I was too young. But I mean, I thought one of the most exciting ones was like, okay, the reason it was so college football, I don't want it to go the route of college basketball. So college basketball, nobody cares about college basketball until March. They sacrifice 3 months for 3 weeks. I don't want college football to do that.
No, it won't. It won't, because the NFL has proven that to us. It's important to continue to play for a bye. It's important to continue to play for home field advantage. But if you're playing 12 quality opponents every year and you finish 9-3, then that's worthy in a super conference of, say, 48 teams. That's worthy of making a 12-team playoff. Probably a 9-3 team or a 10-2 team is going to make it, right? And I'm cool with that. The thing that the scariest thing about the playoff is that right now you have a top end. It was Alabama and now it's Georgia, and probably both of them to some extent. You have a top end who are going to beat the bejesus out of the first team they play. And that's kind of boring. We were fortunate that didn't happen this past year, and maybe those days are over. That's the only downfall I see, is having like the way they're doing the buys. I love it, because if you had one play 12 and two play 11, they would just beat the dog stuffing out of them. That wouldn't be any fun to watch at all. So I like the way the first four teams have a bye. I like everything about it. I mean, I consider myself a traditionalist, but in this regard, I guess I'm exactly the opposite.
Here's the problem with the teams at the bye. 5 is going to play 12. 5 might just very well be the third best team in the nation, but they didn't win conference technically. So, and then 12 will be a group of 5 champion. So 5 and 12 is going to be a gigantic blowout anyway. This isn't going to be March Madness, guys. This isn't going to be, you're not going to be but see a bunch of 16 seeds upset 1 seeds or whatever.
Well, but that's Cindy Crawford's mole. You know, that's one little bitty thing. She's still super hot. And I think the college football playoff is super smoking hot.
We'll see.
I mean, I'll take that little mole that you pointed out.
My issue is that now here's where it would be exciting. Okay, say you take the top 48 teams. If they then separated, say, okay, top 48 teams, you separated and you had like 4 12-team conferences out of that. You know, they organized the conference, and then they were like, whoever wins these conferences they'll play conference championship games. You'll get the first round buys, those 4 teams. Because then there is always something to play for. I like the idea of many conferences within conferences. Until they organize to create their own conference, I'm sorry. I think Tennessee should consider. I think Tennessee would have been smart years ago to consider going independent. Even when they were bad, they were probably one of the top revenue producers in the SEC. They've always been in the top half.
It's a lot of cash to turn down.
I
don't know about independent. I don't know that you could do that in reverse, but
one of the things that hurt Tennessee.
Did Tennessee go independent?
You want to know what really hurt Tennessee, Dave, in the 2000s that no one talks about? One of the underrated things, the SEC's TV deals. When the SEC started bringing in all that money and splitting it evenly, a bunch of schools caught up with Tennessee's recruiting budget after that. When Tennessee had the financial recruiting advantage over every school in the 90s, that was a huge deal. And then they had to split that revenue with everybody in the 2000s.